Hi there. I'm Robert Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico. History and heritage. They're connected, but they are not the same thing. So I want to talk a little bit about both of these words and what they mean to us, and why we need to know how to identify them and apply them correctly. History is the study of past events and people. Heritage is what we inherit. We inherit from our parents, our aunts and uncles, our community, our immediate community. For example, the history of New Mexico goes back thousands of years. Native Americans living, fighting, thriving, surviving, and then Spaniards coming in the 1500s first to explore, but also to colonize and conquer the local people. That's history. They did things like enslave Native Americans, put them in encomienda system, and the Spanish also brought Catholicism, Spanish language, system of government that was a monarchy. They brought a lot of things like animals and fruits and vegetables. The Pueblo people had agriculture. They had their own system of governing. They had their own religion. So what you see happening in the history is a lot of interaction. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's ugly, and sometimes it's not so good. That's what history is. It's studying things like how our founding fathers established a new nation in 1776, where everyone was equal, except people who were slaves or Native Americans. See, what I said before was the good part, the amazing, fun, fascinating part that we like to study. What I said after that, though, is the more difficult part to study and deal with. But we have to. We have to look at history realistically, and we have to look at the whole history. If we just look at the good parts or the parts that we like or enjoy, then that could lead later on to dysfunctional or unhealthy expressions of historical development or historical interpretation. We need to look at the whole picture and how it impacts everyone. Let's talk a little bit about heritage. We'll go back and forth, but now on to heritage. Recently, my cousin got in touch with me and he started sending me photos of our family, the Martinez family. We have roots up in Mora, New Mexico. We used to go when we were kids. Our parents would take us to Mora for the fiestas. The patron saint of Mora is Santa Gertrudes, but they always celebrated it on the Dia de Santiago, Santa Ana. We didn't know anything about that. We just knew it was a fiesta. We were going to see our grandma and grandpa. We were going to see our primos, our cousins, our aunts and uncles. They would converge from Denver, and we would come up from Albuquerque, and it was a big party. It really was a fiesta. We sold tamales, we sold burritos, sodas. There's photos of my dad and my uncle drinking beer. We had a great time. Sometimes the fiestas, though, would get violent. There was a little bar right next door to the vendible, the little area where we would sell our food. And there could be some violent fights. That's the part that's not so pleasant. It was a little bit traumatic. I was about 6 or 7 at the time and saw some violence. That's part of life. But the heritage we were celebrating in Mora in the 60s and in the 70s was our Mexican-American heritage, with roots going to Spain, but deeply through Mexico, and also with Pueblo Indian roots, Genízaro Indian roots, Mexican Indian roots, African roots. Believe me, we didn't know anything about any of this. You know what else we didn't know about? Juan de Oñate or Diego de Vargas. We didn't know that history. That was history. It wasn't a heritage that we celebrated. We just were there to celebrate our family, to celebrate our community. That's what we were there to do. The heritage that I inherited from my family includes my last name, Martinez, my mom's last name, Salazar. I also inherited speaking English because we are American. So I also speak some Spanish. When I was a little kid, I didn't speak that much, but later in life, I learned it. So, Spanish, the Spanish language, is also my heritage, my inheritance. I got that from my family. My grandma and grandpa, my grandma could speak some English, so I got to communicate with her. My grandpa, not so much. He just kind of looked at you a certain way and you knew what he was thinking. Um, so, that was the inheritance, the heritage I got from my family. Um, a work ethic. My father and my grandpa taught all of us that you work all the time. You do not sit around doing nothing. You work. You work as a banker, as a lawyer, as a doctor, or you work as a busboy. You work as a construction worker. You do whatever you have to work. That's my heritage. That's an inheritance I got from them. So these are the things you celebrate and enjoy. How about food? I grew up eating frijoles y chile, tortillas, chicharrones, fideos, um, all these beautiful foods that are Puebloan and Mexican and Spanish ingredients that are all mixed together. But they're foods that have evolved. Tamales from Mexico, pozole, all of these foods. And of course, I also have a heritage that's American. I love cheeseburgers, meatloaf, spaghetti and meatballs from the Italians. This is our heritage. And it's something that has been given to us immediately from my parents, from my grandparents, from my aunts and uncles, from my brothers and sisters and cousins, friends. This is our heritage. And these are the things we come together to celebrate. We celebrate our Mexican American heritage, our Spanish heritage. We celebrate being Irish on St. Patrick's Day. We celebrate being American on July 4th. We celebrate being Mexican on Cinco de Mayo. These are heritage. These are things that are more immediate. Now, let's contrast that with history. Juan de Oñate came in 1598 and brought colonists, people who were of Spanish, Mexican Indian, African, mixed background, deep roots in various parts of the world. They brought their culture, they brought their government, they brought their religion, Roman Catholicism, and it clashed with the Pueblos. One economic system brought by the Spaniards was the encomienda, a type of fief. It's medieval, and it's how you turn people you conquer into vassals. They pay you tribute in the form of goods and labor. It's a form of servitude. And this is something the Spaniards put in place in New Mexico in the 1600s. I descend from a few of those encomenderos, those Spanish families that collected tribute from Pueblo people. But I have to remember, I also have Pueblo ancestry, so I likely descend from people who were under the encomienda system. This is a fascinating thing to study, to find out about, to see how the encomienda system was implemented in places like Mexico, the Philippines, South America, and the Caribbean, and its roots in medieval Spain when the Catholics were fighting the Moors, and when they would take over a town, they would do that to the local people. The Españoles, the Spaniards, would collect tribute from the conquered Moors. This is fascinating, but it's not something to celebrate. It's not something to be ashamed of or to be proud of. It's something we need to learn about so we can see what kinds of attitudes were handed down through the centuries. We know that it was one of the things that the Pueblo people got tired of, and in 1680, they revolted and killed many Spanish men, women, and children and priests and kicked the Spanish out. When the Spaniards returned 12 years later, there was no more encomienda system. So this is what we need to look at, the history. Diego de Vargas brought the Spanish back. He brought Spanish culture back, Spanish civilization. He also killed 70 Native American Pueblo warriors in the Plaza of Santa Fe in that battle to retake La Villa de Santa Fe. This is the less happy part of the history between Spaniards and Puebloans that we need to acknowledge and learn about. But we don't need to celebrate it. We have a brilliant heritage here. It's a mix of Puebloan, Genízaro, Apache, Navajo, Comanche, Spanish, Mexican, American, Jewish, Muslim, African, Asian. We've got it all here. But history is something we need to study and learn about. Heritage is what we should be celebrating. Thank you for listening to me. See you next time. Adios. Bye.